Have you ever wondered what happens when pain transforms us? When, instead of healing our wounds, we allow them to define who we are? And what if, in an effort to protect ourselves, we end up becoming what we fear the most? Nietzsche once said something deeply profound. He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. It's a powerful reflection, isn't it? At its core, he's reminding us that anyone, at some point, can be drawn toward the darker side of life. Life isn't always fair. At some point, we all experience the pain of betrayal, abandonment, or injustice. These experiences can leave deep scars that, if left unhealed, turn into invisible chains that trap us in cycles of resentment and anger. Think about how many times you've sworn never to trust anyone again or never to repeat a mistake. Now imagine turning that promise into armor that not only blocks out suffering but also any chance of connection, joy, or love. It's not easy to admit, but revenge, that urge to rebel against the world and the pain it caused, can become an emotional and philosophical trap. And here's the central question that will guide our conversation today. How can we prevent pain from turning us into something we're not? In this video, we'll explore how the allure of revenge captivates us, the hidden cost of that journey, and most importantly, how to find strength and vulnerability to rebuild ourselves. This is a conversation about monsters, not the kind from fairy tales, but the ones we create within ourselves. Get ready, because this is an invitation to look inward, perhaps with courage, perhaps with discomfort, but always with the hope that in the end, there's a path to something greater. Why does revenge seem so appealing? Perhaps because it offers us a false sense of control, a powerful narrative where we are both the protagonist and the hero. Picture the scene. Someone wounded, humiliated, rejected by life, who decides to don emotional armor. This figure isn't just symbolic, it lives within many of us. It is the embodiment of pain that, rather than being resolved, has been turned into an identity. The allure of revenge is captivating because it gives purpose to those who feel lost. Think of movies and books that glorify the lone avenger, the dramatic background music, the physical and emotional transformation, the unwavering determination. This often idealized narrative resonates in our minds as a way to rise again. The problem? It often disconnects us from reality. Nietzsche, in discussing the concept of resentment, described how a wounded soul can create narratives that distort the truth. In resentment, we don't just seek to defend ourselves. We aim to rewrite the past, punish the world, and even ourselves for having been vulnerable. For Nietzsche, this is a dangerous trap. Resentment doesn't set us free. It only strengthens the chains of suffering. But there is something deeper in this pursuit of revenge, the attempt to silence pain. By transforming pain into anger, we craft a narrative where we don't have to confront our own vulnerability. Yet this comes at a cost. Think about it. Every time you give in to anger without processing its origin, you are feeding an invisible giant within you. This giant, like the one in the narrative from the introduction, is a mental construct made of all the disappointments, humiliations, and unresolved defeats. It grows, it strengthens, and eventually it takes control. You are no longer living, you are merely reacting. This is where we begin to lose our humanity. When we choose to set aside what makes us feel, connect and dream, just to play the part of the invincible. However, this monster isn't invincible, it's fragile. It thrives on the denial of time, as if the past could be erased by the force of anger. But let's be honest. Time cannot be defeated. The only way to deal with it is to accept it. The allure of revenge is powerful because it deceives us, offering a narrative of power and control, when in reality, it robs us of the chance to free ourselves. And here's where the most important question arises. How much longer are you willing to spend fighting something that's already behind you? Isn't it time to start seeing pain as a catalyst for growth rather than a justification for destruction? Anger is a powerful force. It can give us the push we need, protect us in tough moments, and even transform us. But there's a fine line between using anger to grow and letting it take over. When we cross that line, anger stops being just a fleeting emotion and becomes a way of life. Without realizing it, we end up trapped by the very thing we set out to fight against. Imagine a dark room. It's where you store all your grievances, the times you were betrayed, humiliated, or treated unfairly. Now, visualize the effort it takes to keep that room locked. Every time you revisit those memories, you reignite the pain, feed the resentment, and reinforce the walls of this emotional prison. It's a cycle that drains your vital energy, robbing you of the ability to live fully in the present. Philosopher and psychologist Henri Laborie identified this cycle as a form of illusory self-defense. Instead of confronting the source of our pain, we create shadow giants, living metaphors for our traumas and resentments. These giants give us the impression that we're fighting, but in reality we're just spinning in circles within our own minds. At first, this mental construct can feel comforting. After all, having an enemy gives meaning to our pain. However, this narrative comes at a cost: our humanity. By identifying with anger, you gradually lose access to other parts of yourself: compassion, vulnerability, and even joy. The monster we create to combat our pain begins to take over until there's nothing left but the monster itself. And here's the paradox: the more we try to protect ourselves from pain, the more we become enslaved by it. Anger promises us freedom, but delivers the opposite. Think of it as a distorted mirror. While you see yourself as strong and invincible, others see someone hardened, isolated, and unable to connect. The writer James Hillman reminds us that emotions like sadness and anger are portals to a deeper understanding of ourselves. They are, in a way, guides, but only if we have the courage to go through them. When we avoid feeling the sadness that lies at the root of our anger, we remain stuck on the surface, perpetuating the destructive cycle. Losing yourself and becoming someone you no longer recognize doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, almost imperceptible process. It starts with small adjustments. You build a mask of strength, decide to pull away to avoid getting hurt again, and convince yourself that no one will ever understand what you're feeling. Without realizing it, you shape this monster until one day you look in the mirror and no longer know who you are. But what if the true act of strength was something else? What if, instead of continuing to feed the monster, you chose to face it? The process would undoubtedly be painful. Letting go of anger means confronting the vulnerability it hides. Yet, it is in this confrontation that the chance for liberation lies. The hidden cost of anger is high. It steals not only your peace, but also the opportunity for transformation. Perhaps the question we need to ask ourselves is it worth paying that price? There's something almost irresistible about keeping pain alive within us. It becomes a constant reminder of everything we've lost, of every time we've been hurt or disappointed. But pain, if not confronted, transforms into something deeper and more insidious: a shield against life. This shield, which initially seems to protect us, actually separates us from the world, condemning us to live in the past. Time is a peculiar adversary. It cannot be fought, avoided, or deceived, yet we often struggle against it desperately. We insist on keeping painful memories alive as if revisiting the past could somehow change it. But time makes no concessions. It moves forward, indifferent to our internal battles. This resistance to time is at the core of what keeps us trapped in pain. Refusing to let go of the past is like trying to hold back the wind with your hands. And while we cling to these painful memories, we neglect the present, the only part of life where we can truly act. Accepting time does not mean ignoring the past. On the contrary, it means facing it with courage. It means accepting that we've been hurt, that we've suffered losses, and that despite all of it, we are still here. This requires vulnerability, a word we often associate with weakness, but which is, in truth, a profound act of strength. Brené Brown, a researcher widely known for her studies on vulnerability, argues that being vulnerable doesn't mean exposing yourself to harm without resistance. It's about being open to life as it is, with all its uncertainties and challenges. Being vulnerable means admitting that we feel pain, truly experiencing it, but not allowing it to define who we are. However, facing time and embracing vulnerability is not an easy path. Often, it is a journey marked by fear and resistance. After all, letting go of control, or the illusion of control, is one of the most challenging acts we can undertake. This is where the courage to start anew comes in. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, speaks about how we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to respond. For him, finding meaning in life is not just a beautiful idea or a philosophical notion, it is a basic necessity of the human spirit. Embracing vulnerability is, in a way, a surrender to the flow of life, not a passive surrender, but an active choice to say, yes, I've been hurt. Yes, there are things I cannot change, but that doesn't mean my story ends here. And when we allow ourselves this act of courage, something incredible begins to happen. The weight of the past, once unbearable, starts to lighten. We discover that we don't have to carry everything alone, that there is room for the new, for the unexpected, for reconnection with what makes us human. Thus, facing time is not just a way to let go of pain, it is a way to rediscover life. The acceptance of vulnerability grants us the freedom to breathe again, to look ahead, and to ask ourselves what is still possible. Pain has two sides. On one side is the suffering that paralyzes us, causing past wounds to repeat endlessly. On the other side lies the chance to change, to start over. What determines which side will weigh more is not the intensity of the pain, but how we choose to deal with it. There's a powerful concept in alchemy that illustrates this process. Nigredo, representing the initial stage of transformation, Nigredo is a descent into darkness, confusion, and chaos. It's the moment when everything seems lost, but paradoxically contains the seed of renewal. Before we can find the light, we must confront the dark, accept what has been destroyed so that something new can emerge. In the emotional realm, Nigredo is the acknowledgement of pain. It's not about denying or hiding it, but facing it head-on, allowing it to reveal its message. Think of it as cleaning a wound. It's painful but necessary for healing to begin. Clive Staples Lewis, author of The Four Loves, wrote something remarkable. Pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. What he means is that pain isn't just suffering. It's also a call, a way to grow, to look inward, and perhaps to transform. But how can we turn pain into strength? The answer begins with an act of courage, allowing ourselves to feel. In our society, we're often taught to avoid or numb suffering. We fill our days with distractions, with busyness, with anything that keeps us from facing our emotions. But by doing so, we deny ourselves the opportunity to understand what those emotions have to teach us. This is the point where rebirth begins to take shape. When we recognize that pain is not an obstacle, but a process. When we stop fighting it and start asking, what can I learn from this? A powerful example of this transformation can be found in the work of Viktor Frankl. He explains that even in the most adverse circumstances, human beings can find meaning, and it is this meaning that gives us the strength to move forward. When we face pain head-on, it can reveal strengths we didn't even know we had. It can make us stronger, more empathetic, and more aligned with what truly matters. This doesn't mean glorifying suffering, but rather accepting that it is an inevitable and important part of the human experience. Rebirth also requires action. It's not enough to understand pain. We must transform it into movement. For some, this might mean rebuilding relationships. For others, it could be rediscovering passions or redefining priorities. What matters is that pain is not the end point, but the starting point. In alchemy, after the Nigredo comes the albedo, the stage of purification and rebirth. It is here that darkness gives way to clarity, and chaos organizes into a new form of life. In practice, this means allowing the past to inform the present without controlling it. It means letting go, but without forgetting. Like a fire that consumes, pain transforms us. It burns away what no longer serves us, revealing what is essential. And in this way, we are reborn, not as who we were before, but as a stronger, more authentic version of ourselves. So, the question is, what can your pain teach you? What version of yourself is waiting to emerge from the ashes? The journey of rebirth is not a straight line. It is a winding path, filled with doubts, setbacks, and unexpected discoveries. Yet, it is also a deeply human journey, connecting us all through our shared capacity to overcome, grow, and find meaning even in the most painful experiences. Emotional alchemy begins with accepting that pain is a part of life, not as a punishment, but as an inevitable element of existence. Imagine carving a work of art from marble. The process is arduous, demanding effort, and at times it feels like you're destroying more than creating. But eventually the form begins to emerge, a shape made possible only through the strikes and cuts. Our pain works the same way. It carves us, shapes us, and in time reveals something new. However, there is a trap in this process, becoming attached to the pain. For some, pain becomes an identity, a justification to avoid change, or a pretext to remain in the comfort of familiar suffering. This attachment, though understandable, blocks rebirth. It's like holding on to a heavy stone while trying to swim. You must let it go to keep moving forward. There comes a pivotal moment in the transformation journey, the moment you choose. You choose to stop identifying as a victim. You choose to see pain not as an end, but as a means. You choose to leave the past where it belongs, not because it doesn't matter, but because life happens in the present. Joseph Campbell, renowned for his theory of the hero's journey, described this moment as the call to adventure. In his view, every hero must face their deepest fears to achieve transformation. The same applies to our pain. It calls us to the adventure of rebuilding ourselves, of discovering who we are beyond the wounds. Transforming pain into strength requires patience. It's like purifying gold in fire. It doesn't happen overnight. Emotional transformation also takes time. There will be moments when you feel like you're not moving forward, like everything is stuck, or the pain is too heavy to bear. But like any healing process, progress comes in small steps, even if you don't notice it right away. Think about those people who went through great difficulties and managed to turn it all into something incredible. But remember, you don't have to be a public figure or a global hero to go through this process. This is something anyone can do in their own time and in their own way. Rebirth happens in the small acts of courage, asking for help, forgiving yourself, restarting an abandoned project, reconnecting with someone. Each act is a reminder that we are alive, that the pain didn't define us but shaped us. There's a Japanese term, kintsugi, which means repair with gold. It describes the practice of mending broken pottery with gold dust, highlighting its cracks rather than hiding them. This practice teaches us that our own cracks don't have to be a source of shame. They can be symbols of resilience, of beauty and imperfection. When we finally allow ourselves to be reborn, we discover that pain not only strengthened us, but also opened us to new possibilities. We become more human, more connected, and perhaps more capable of appreciating life's fragility and beauty. And so, the question remains, how can you transform your pain into something worthwhile? What kind of strength is it waiting to reveal? Perfection is a dangerous idea. It makes us believe that we will only be worthy of love, respect, or achievement if we eliminate all our flaws, show no vulnerability, and always remain in control. However, this pursuit of perfection is a lonely and unattainable path. More importantly, it disconnects us from what truly makes us human, our imperfection. When we allow ourselves to be imperfect, we create space for something profound and transformative. Acceptance. Not just acceptance of who we are, but also of what we have experienced. Our flaws, mistakes, and scars cease to be burdens we carry and become stories that have shaped us. Instead of hiding our cracks, we learn to value them, to see them as an essential part of who we are. The beauty of not being perfect lies in the freedom it offers. By letting go of the illusion of total control, we free ourselves from the weight of unrealistic expectations. In this freedom, we find the courage to connect with others, to try again, to fail without fear. After all, life is not a straight line or a competition, but a mosaic of experiences, some glorious, some painful, all essential. Carl Rogers, one of the greatest humanistic psychologists of the 20th century, believed that genuine change only happens when we fully accept ourselves. He once said, "Curiously, when I accept myself as I am, then I can change." Acceptance is not the same as complacency. In fact, it is where any true change begins. Recognizing the beauty of not being perfect also helps us find compassion for ourselves and for others. How often do we judge our own flaws more harshly than we ever would with someone we love? And how often do we isolate ourselves, believing we are the only ones carrying scars? When we embrace our humanity, we realize that we are not alone. Think of the great artists, philosophers, and writers who have shaped the world. Almost all of them were deeply imperfect. Vincent van Gogh struggled with mental instability. Dostoevsky faced poverty and imprisonment. Their lives and works stand as a testament that beauty doesn't come from the absence of flaws, but from the courage to live through them fully. The beauty of imperfection also lies in uncertainty, in not knowing. Life is in a constant state of flux, an endless journey of learning. When we accept that we'll never have all the answers, we can finally relax and enjoy the journey. We are not defined by a single moment, mistake, or pain, but by the entirety of everything we've lived and chosen to be. And this brings us back to the initial question of this video: how do we prevent pain from turning us into the villain? The answer lies not in fighting against it, but in accepting it as part of who we are. It's about remembering that our scars are not evidence of our defeat, but marks of our resilience. It's about understanding that the true act of heroism is having the courage to live, even when life challenges us. So, if you feel like you've gone too far in your struggle, if the pain seems unbearable, remember this: you don't need to be perfect to start over. You don't need to have all the answers. You only need to take one step, then another, and trust that, in time, the light will find you again. The beauty of not being perfect lies in allowing ourselves to keep going, despite everything. Because in the end, it's not the absence of flaws that makes us human, but what we choose to do with them. We've reached the end of this journey, and perhaps you're wondering, what do I do with all of this? The answer is personal, unique to each of us. But one thing is certain: transformation begins with a single step, no matter how small. Remember that pain is not an enemy to be defeated, but a harsh and necessary teacher. It doesn't define who you are, but can reveal who you might become. And most importantly, you don't have to carry the weight of your wounds alone. There is strength in admitting that we are imperfect, that we need help, that we are learning every day. As Leonard Cohen once said, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Your cracks, your imperfections, are precisely what allows the light of growth, reconciliation, and love to shine through. Now, I want to leave you with a question. If you could look at your scars not as marks of pain, but as proof of resilience, how would that change the way you see yourself? Thank you for being here and allowing yourself to join this conversation. The fact that you watched until the end shows your courage to face difficult topics, to look inward, and to question. I know how uncomfortable that can be, but I also know how liberating it is. I remember a moment in my own life when it felt like the pain would never end, that I was trapped in a cycle of anger and isolation. It took time, support, and above all, a willingness to embrace my vulnerability so I could begin to rebuild myself. Looking back, I realize it wasn't perfection that saved me, but the acceptance that I didn't need to be perfect. And now, here we are, sharing this journey. I hope this video has brought something valuable to you, whether it's a new perspective, a moment of reflection, or even the push you needed to take the next step. If this resonated with you, leave your mark in the comments. I'd love to know how this message impacted you, and maybe we can continue this conversation together. Like, share, and subscribe for more conversations like this one. Oh, and before you go, a quick reminder, here on the channel we have other videos that might be exactly what you need right now. I won't give away the topic, but here's a hint. Sometimes the answers we're searching for are hidden in the questions we're afraid to ask. Until the next video, and please remember this, your journey is yours, and you are stronger than you think.